Hello. Who is worthy of care and assistance in America? How should we approach fair and deserving when it comes to the safety net? For GoFundMe, that is a $50 million a week question. And this is such a complicated and complex subject. I'm so glad to have with us today Nora Kenworthy, PhD, author of Crowded Out and the 2026 winner of our New Procedure Press Literary Prize, here with us today to share her work. And we are also lucky to be joined by my friend and celebrity judge, Dr. Victor Montori, who is an endocrinologist, health services researcher, care activist, and author of Why We Revolt, another fantastic book in this space. Together, we're going to explore crowdfunding and health justice. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, wonderful. So let's start first with this incredible book. For those of people who've maybe not heard about it, Nora, tell us a little bit about crowdfunding and why this is an interesting way to look at bigger dynamics that are happening in healthcare and in America at large.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, for featuring the book. I'm so excited to share it with your listeners. I stumbled across sites like GoFundMe many years ago when they were just starting out. It was a time when people would still print out flyers of their campaigns with little tear-off tabs at the bottom and post them around neighborhoods. And, like all good book projects, this one started as just like a puzzle that I couldn't figure out and a problem that I couldn't find my way to look away from. And I I was really driven by stories, honestly, that were being shared on sites like GoFundMe, um, trying to understand what people were doing on sites like this, what they were seeking, what they were hoping to find, and also what was forcing them or driving them to crowdfund in the first place. And as I started asking those questions, the phenomenon of crowdfunding just kept getting more and more popular. By 2019, a quarter of Americans had started or donated to a campaign for medical expenses. GoFundMe became an eponym for what we do in crisis. You should start a GoFundMe. We're going to need a GoFundMe. And it started to feel like we could trace America's moments of crisis, of trauma, of hate, also of hope by sort of hopscotching from one viral campaign to the next. But really what inspired me to write this book was conversations with neighbors and friends and family and my own students about what was happening here. And especially with the kinds of questions that were constantly being brought to me and that I was trying to answer, like, why is crowdfunding so popular? What should I think when I look at the campaign of a celebrity that's really successful, right? Or what kinds of campaigns succeed and which ones do not? And I think more broadly, how is crowdfunding changing the way we perceive the medical system in the United States, but also how we give and receive help to each other in this country?
Victor, I know that you really enjoyed reading this book as part of your judging this year. Oh, we lost Nora somehow, but that's okay. She will be back shortly. Tell us about what really surprised you with this book. You obviously had heard about crowdfunding before.
Yeah, there are well, it's extraordinarily well written, so that made it a very pleasurable read. Then it was a familiar topic, so I had to read the book for the purposes of the judging, and but if I had to think about reading a book about crowdfunding, I probably would not have been inclined to pick it up because I have the impression that I already knew about it. And then what Dr. Kenworthy does is she opens this door, and you start walking in, and you go, "Wow!" Oh, many of the things that make the American healthcare universe such a cruel place are manifesting through this lens. So I think the wonderful magic trick of the book is you get through this familiar place. Nora just said that many people have participated in it, and then through it you are confronted with, aspects of how we move around in society that are frankly disgusting and
Mhm.
profoundly sad.
Mhm.
Um, um, in a place where you think, "Oh, this is solidarity in action," and it's like, "Is it?" Oh, it's the best of us. Is it?
Mhm.
So it is this incredible story of what looks like goodness on steroids, and it's, man, there's it is an incredible way of looking at the reality of healthcare in ways that, where I was super familiar with. I was, surprised after surprise after. It's a very insightful book, and it provides a lot of, it offers a lot of questions that make you reflect on the kinds of arrangements we have in our society to care for each other. So it is, I think, it is in that way, as a dissemination of ideas, not just about crowdfunding in healthcare, but about healthcare and society at large. It is a wonderful book and very deserving of this award.
There's a meme, I think, in Silicon Valley, which is where I am from, around, the sort of the tech bros rediscovering things over and over again, right? And they're like, what if we had these vessels and people could buy a ticket and they would ride on it? And you're like, yeah, you discovered buses, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that seems to apply with crowdfunding, right? And with these platforms of, people kind of discovering mutual aid and supporting your neighbors and these kinds of very old-fashioned things. But then, of course, it gets complicated when this becomes somebody's business, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think Silicon Valley companies that, set out to disrupt a thing often have more of a disruptive influence than they expect to have,
Mhm.
and sometimes disrupt parts of the thing that actually were working quite well. Um,
Mm.
but I think there was also a way in which a lot of crowdfunding got built. Early crowdfunding got built just because, like, we had certain tools, right? Like PayPal was really big at that time, so we had the ability to sort of transfer money electronically. That was
Mhm.
becoming an increasingly kind of important way that we transacted online. I remember talking to the founder of Fundraiser, which was another early crowdfunding platform, and he was like, we turned it on and we didn't know what we were going to see. And then all of a sudden it was
Mm.
medical procedures, it was house fires, it was all these crises. And I think if you look at the early funders or founders of these platforms, they were like, well, we're going to build something where communities can kind of do nice things for each other. And then it became this vessel in which, like, all of the crises of modern life and neoliberalism were sort
Mhm.
of pouring into it, right?
Mhm.
So part of it is that maybe crowdfunding wasn't necessarily built for this purpose, but this is the purpose to which people use it. The other part of it is that, um, we took existing forms and of collective solidarity, ways that people have always been in community supporting each other, and then projected that onto the internet, right? And social
Mhm.
media with all of the inequities and challenges that exist there in terms of what gets seen
Mhm.
and what gets amplified.
And this is a very powerful platform. I know that the CEO of GoFundMe has talked a little bit about, not really intending for this to become a healthcare safety net
Mhm.
platform, but it has become. But it's very difficult, right? Once you have this incredible, very profitable company to take that and to try to like shoot yourself in the foot by trying to lead change. Talk about that angle on it. I mean, do you see there's so much potential in the platform that is here in order to speak out, but it doesn't seem like that's part of its mission right now.
I try not to
Mhm.
make assumptions about what any of these companies want.
Mhm.
GoFundMe, for example, is a privately traded company.
Mhm.
We don't even have access to much of their financial documentation to understand, like,
Mhm.
what they make money off of besides,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
tips that are given on donations. I think they have said publicly, we wish this was like for soccer teams and,
Yeah.
and I do think they have a bit of a PR challenge. It's
Mhm.
like, you know, they want people to come together, but also not be so depressing that it like ruins their brand.
Yeah.
But guess what? Surviving in America right now is pretty depressing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, one of the more interesting kind of stories about the current CEO of GoFundMe, of course, is that his own neighborhood of LA was involved in the LA wildfires last year. And
Mhm.
so it went from, you know, being a platform where there, you know, he was helping a lot of strangers to really one where, you know, his own neighbors were
Mm.
turning to it. Um, and I do wonder about the extent to which that may have kind of shifted the internal thinking around
Mm.
how these things work at GoFundMe. But again, you know,
We
this
don't
is
know.
speculative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't
I
know.
do think that, you know, given how many people are using these platforms, given how many people are donating at any moment in time, we do deserve a bit more kind of public transparency
Mhm. Mhm.
about, you know, some of the questions that get raised pretty frequently about, you know, where do the tips go when I tip on a campaign? Or
Mhm.
how does GoFundMe make decisions about like verified fundraisers or what ends up on the front page of their website? You know, because these campaigns are so consequential to people's lives.
Mhm. Mhm. Let's talk about the book and also these campaigns themselves in a meta level of how we raise awareness through these kinds of stories. Because I think there is an interesting, maybe side effect of GoFundMe is really telling the story
Mm.
of financial toxicity and medical cost hardship in a way that maybe we weren't doing that as much 10 years ago. But also then using books to tell those stories too. So, Victor, you are an author as well. Your book is now coming on how many years since it's published?
It's the first
Yeah,
edition. It will be 10 years next year. So
10 years. Yeah. So creating change through these stories, right? I think that's one of the goals here. With Why We Revolt, 10 years on, do you have kind of a forecast for Dr. Kenworthy of like what might happen with this book and this conversation 10 years
oh, I wouldn't put Why We Revolt and
on?
in the same category of books. I think that I mean, one thing that the audience needs to understand, I think, about Nora's book is that it's an incredible, it's a piece of research, right? That
Mhm.
the fact that it's getting a literary award is because it's written beautifully, and it tells a compelling story. But it is a piece of research, and as a result, you know it is grounded in that ethnography of solidarity, uh, this
Mhm.
sort of Silicon Valley distortions that create these disruptive innovations. Although here, I, I don't know what got disrupted or
Mhm.
co-opted or corrupted. I think there's probably a little bit of all of those, and I think it's much less a story of GoFundMe and entrepreneurs, and much more the story about how we choose to pay for the kinds of investments in human flourishing in our environments.
Mhm.
Why we revolt is a strange thing, and that that's not the book I wanted to write. That
Mhm.
I don't know that you get to control that. I think books have a way of coming out, and you just have to decide if you own them or not. And so why we revolt is less a piece of research and more about a series of reflections that come from a few years of clinical practice and a few years of investigation. And I debated whether it will have footnotes and references, and it has zero, because the in the discussion with people, I the idea was, let's have the stories, and let's have the reflections just stand on their own,
Mhm.
and which I think is a reflection of something that is also in Nora's book, which is issue of privilege, right? I
Mhm.
didn't have to credentialize my book to the extent that maybe many other people have to, in order
Mhm.
for the stories and points that they have to make to stand on their own. I chose not to do it, and it turned out to be Nobody has ever asked, oh, where are your references? And where are the footnotes? Nobody has ever asked for that, right? And so and the fact that it's still the book is still around and people are still asking for copies has to do with the fact that it's underpinning a movement for care. And so it's almost like if I was a professor or some sort that will take the book and make it a textbook for the class, and all of a sudden people still, I wonder why they're interested in my book. Hey, textbook, from the class, right? And so I don't know that it would last this long if there was not a movement tied to it that is it's increasingly urgent, which is to bring about careful and kind care for all. I think Nora's book is going to stand as a demonstration of where we are at with our commitment to each other in this country, and as a result, even if we were to move on from this kind of crowdfunding, it will become a piece of research that will be important to identify where we were on the turn of the century and the first 2 decades of the century. So I suspect it would live on much longer than Why We Revolt.
That's very kind. I was writing this book and I was constantly feeling like it was already out of date, because if you write about a tech thing, it always feels like you're behind the times. But if I could elaborate a little bit on that question, I think one of the things that unites both of these books, and I think unites broader movements for patient advocacy in the United States, is the power of these stories of what it is actually like to experience the health system in the United States. And because so much of our care seeking happens in times of crisis and in private spaces, we are not always afforded these windows into just how difficult it is to secure and survive the medical system in the US. And for me, these crowdfunding campaigns were sort of the front door into those stories. They're not the whole story. And it's really important to recognize that they're not, when you're looking at a campaign, you're getting a slice of a story. But it became an entry point for me to sit with people and talk to them about what the full story was. And I feel really honored to have been let into those stories, and to have been able to kind of carry them. And I try to carry them gently in this book. But it does feel to me like there is a power in those stories, and this is why I'm such a huge fan of what you're doing with the Procedure Awards, because time and time again we see that when we make strides improving our systems of care, improving the policy that shapes those systems of care, those strides are often driven by really powerful patient stories about injustice, and so I think those stories hold power for all of us, and I hope that people keep sharing their stories.
The way you treat those stories, again, I think it for those who have not picked up the book, the way you treat those stories is with enormous reverence and respect and warmth, and very gently, as you said, and I think that also brings warmth to the book, which is and transcends the technical aspects of it to really help the reader connect with the human aspect of it. I mean, the one of the things that just drives me insane is the idea that people don't get to fully understand how terrible things are until they are in it, right? And it's like, man, if we could just listen a little bit. You don't have to go through it to understand that it sucks. It almost feels like again and again. I mean, I in my area, I mean, one of the things that upsets me is how when doctors become patients and write when I was a patient books, like, and you didn't realize it was like this before. Even when you're talking to these people again and again and again and again, you didn't get to see it, and it just makes me mad, because it's just we're not listening.
That's so powerful. I do think, it's changed a lot. It's interesting to try to watch, like you said, when you're writing this book, you're kind of almost hoping maybe it's going to be a time capsule. Maybe by the time this book comes out, things will be different. And of course, it's not different. Or it's worse, maybe sometimes. But I do feel like we're in this sort of a cycle now of at least we're talking about the financial toxicity, and we're talking about, there's such a taboo about talking about money. And I do think we should be somewhat grateful to GoFundMe, at least bringing these conversations up. But what is that next step, right? How do we go? And we have our patient revolution expert here. How do we go from this storytelling into this next point of some kind of action and some kind of just feeling like this is too much? And that's, when you're writing this book, who is it really that you're trying to, like, ultimately, is there a policymaker or somebody that you're trying to reach with this, an audience of 1 or maybe 10 that you feel like could take this story and really create some change for you?
Yeah. Well, let me talk about 2 silver linings of the book, as depressing as it is, and then talk a little bit about the policy change. I think the 2 silver linings are, first, crowdfunding displays our enormous human capacity for caring for one another, and how much we want to do that, and how much we want to show up for each other. And I think Americans are particularly inculcated with this idea of sort of individualism and getting by yourself. And if there's one message that I hope people take from crowdfunding, it's that a lot of people in your life want to help you. And it's okay to ask for help. So that's one. I think the second one is, as divided as we are right now as a country, I think there is a very shared notion that the system is not working. And I think you really see that reflected in crowdfunding campaigns. So often people will start a campaign and say something like, as you know, getting sick in this country causes impossible financial problems, right? And that doesn't get disputed. And so I think that is a point of commonality. And I think some of the policy, the few policy wins that we're seeing right now are around that shared recognition. If you look at the cost of insulin finally getting reduced in certain sectors, or some of the kind of progress we've made around medical debt. But one of the arguments I'm trying to make in the book is that, while we've made a lot of strides in recognizing the financial toxicity of our health system, I don't think we've made as much progress in recognizing some of the moral toxicities of our system and how those things are tied together, right? So these really toxic ideas about hyper-individualism, about meritocracy, about technology will save it, that all of these are tied into the financial toxicity of our system and how patients find themselves sort of being like financially eaten alive by the system. And that in order to change the system, we also have to address and confront some of those moral toxicities that I think really inhibit us as a society from really taking seriously some of the things that we have to do in order to reform our healthcare system and make it serve people more equitably.
I think that's what got me, right? I mean, I was actually much less drawn by GoFundMe as a technology platform or whatever, and to some extent less surprised or taken by the financial aspects of paying for healthcare, because again, it's it is what it shows you about how we choose to, so great that we show up to care, but how we choose to show up to care and for whom do we show up to care matters tremendously. And the fact that if you have a disease, or you as a patient don't look, or your family doesn't look, doesn't have the right marketing around the condition or the reason for the funds and so forth, you have this incredibly desperate image. I mean, you mentioned, the tradition of the thing, the handout, pasted on the wall with the little tabs, and how sad it is to see one of those with no tabs removed, right? And the fact that, and I forget the statistic, but how many of these campaigns just draw no money, right? And so. It also offers, I think, a point of challenge, which I personally struggle, as trying to sort of catalyze a movement for caring healthcare, is to what extent the existence of these solutions reduce the pressure to actually create the reforms that are necessary for these solutions to become unnecessary.
Yeah.
Right. And so I personally find that they do. That they give an out for people who are comfortable in the way things are and are afraid of the things that if we change the things and how they might end up being. And they will say, well, we have access, and if you don't, there's crowdfunding that might help you with it. Well, is that so I don't know if Nora you want to expand on that, because I think that to me was the fire in the heart sort of part of the book.
Yeah, that's the revolt part of the book.
That's your N1 reader right here.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so I think that crowdfunding has become a really, really powerful distraction to the kinds of conversations that we actually need to be having about how we access care. And it's a distraction not just because people spend their money and their effort and their time there trying to solve problems, but also because it reinforces all of these ideas that are actually antithetical to having a fairer health system. So the idea that we can pick and choose who deserves care, or we can base access to care on characteristics of deservingness or attractiveness or popularity or ability to write a compelling medical narrative, right? And more fundamentally, the idea that certain people are more deserving of care than others, which I think is really antithetical to the kind of baseline establishment of an equitable healthcare system in which you get care regardless of how much of an upstanding citizen you are, how much of a breadwinner you are, or how much your neighbors love you. None of that should be the basis for accessing healthcare that doesn't break you financially.
We have go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this notion of being deserving, it permeates our policies, right? So the incredibly expensive evaluations of people's worthiness for public programs,
Yeah, like Medicaid work requirements. Yeah,
precisely. That those are the formal expression of this, more of an informal expression. And there is this. It of course connects with this Paul Farmer quote. The idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that is wrong in the world. Right. This is the technological manifestation of this idea that some lives are worthy of our financial investment, and that the flip side, that some others are just not. And am I hot enough to deserve your money so I can pay for my surgery? Right? What the hell is we're doing? And then you have Minneapolis, right? So we're doing this just in the shadows of one of the most dramatic, totally predictable but dramatic manifestations of solidarity and mutual aid that sparked just an hour north of me in Minneapolis, where a large number of people just did, to whom it did not matter. They just did. They showed up to print eye cover so that you won't be hurt by the pepper spray, and they put up places where you can gather and eat and prepare. They would go on rides after they're being at work. They'll just go around and connect on WhatsApp and looking at figuring out, protecting their neighbors. Medical students picked up prescriptions and delivered home to people that would not dare to leave their house. Community health workers developed delivery, birthing centers at people's homes, but not in a precarious way, but in a formal way, overnight, literally, just because they had to. And that was not. There was no wait. are you really an immigrant? Are you really going to look like the people that ICE is going to go after? Or do you kind of are maybe more like, U.S. citizen passing, and therefore we're not going to help you? There was no question about.
There was no screening questionnaire.
Which also makes it cheap. But it also speaks to an idea of freedom that I think is something that got lost in our commitment to freedom, which is this quintessential American flavor that we have in our lives in this country, which is this idea that freedom is something that is connected with individualism, when in fact freedom is only possible because of our interdependence, right? And the success of our ability to take care of each other means that we can take risks, that we can go out in the world, we can be entrepreneurial, we can go into the forest and enjoy a day in nature. Because if something were to happen to us, either we were to become poor in our pursuits, or become sick as we are trying to do our community will pick us up and get us back on, and we'll try again. That's the core of freedom, is this interdependence. And we've made it into this other thing where if you cannot do it on your own, well, I guess if you look the part, we'll save you, and if not, you're on your own. I mean, what institutionalized cruelty is that? And anyway, just got excited there about it.
We love you getting excited. Well, we only have a few more minutes left, and so I think everybody who's watching is also getting excited at this point. So tell us, we'll start with Nora, more about where we can find the book, where can we find more about your writing, where can we hear more about what you're doing, and then Victor, we'll have you go next.
Thanks. Well, you can find the book anywhere, I hope. I'm also told that a great number of libraries carry it. So you can definitely find electronic copies on Libby and other places. I avoid a lot of social media, actually. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Blue Sky. I also have a podcast that I do with a journalist here in Seattle called In the Meanwhile, which actually came out of a concept from the final part of the book about sort of how we live in the time before justice comes to pass, and what we do with that time and why it matters. So I encourage people to tune in there. We just this past week interviewed the incredible writer Ijeoma Oluo about her work with movements and solidarity movements here in Seattle. So, and then I am currently working on 2 new projects. One with chronically ill and disabled patients to understand the complex and really sophisticated ways that they use different types of technology to actually create the kinds of collective care that Victor is describing happening in Minneapolis. And then my second new project is a Carnegie Foundation funded project looking at polarization and digital worlds and healthcare in the United States. So possible the next book will be on that. We will see.
Victor, tell us more about your book for those people who maybe not heard it, and your movement, and where we can find out more about what you're leading.
Yeah. So I think if you go to patientrevolution.org, you will see what the movement is about, and invite people to join as fellows. We're developing chapters, so you can be on the ground floor of this, which is a global movement for caring healthcare. It's not just it's not about patient advocacy or clinician advocacy, but it's really about advocating for care. And we think of caring healthcare as just a specialized form of the care that we've been talking about during this conversation, but one that seems impossible to occur if the underlying caring society that props up healthcare drifts away from these what appears to be a core tenet of humanity, which is that to care is human, and humans must care. My current projects have to do with paying attention to the introduction of AI and the replacement of human care with artificial care, and the value proposition that offers, but also the challenges to what care truly is. And then the other project that I'm involved in more on the research side is to is to define and assess care, and and say, is care happening in this healthcare organization? Recognizing that many healthcare organizations find it hard to make care core to what they do. Well, and they believe you don't measure, you can't improve it. Okay, well, let's figure out, how do we know if care is happening here? And that is an interesting. I'm hoping it will be some sort of gateway drug to understanding the lack of care, the replacement of care with processing of people in an industrialized way, and eventually what I think will happen, which is a replacement of healthcare organizations with technology companies that will give us care-like experiences, just like GoFundMe is a solidarity-like experience, which will eventually reduce what it means to live like people in a community, like humans. And so we'll see where that takes us. But those are some of the next adventures.
Oh, I'm so humbled and grateful for both of your time and your writing. Two incredibly smart and good and interesting people. And what a joy to have you on the conversation with us today. And thank you so much for the work that you do. And happy Monday, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks so much.